I kept seeing this, I started to realize, okay, like we have to do a much better job on educating the opportunity around ordinals if we want ordinals to grow. And I think this is actually the biggest problem behind ordinals at the moment. There's not really too many compelling narratives in this kind of market that are really driving more attention on the beauty and the future of ordinals. And because of that, it's getting stale and it's getting into another problem, right? Which is just generally is that the entire digital collectible market is down. So it's very easy to not only point fingers at, oh, ETH is down. It's very easy to then go double click and be like, oh, Ordinals is down as well. But there is healthy divergence, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. There are new projects that are coming out with different narratives that could be very interesting. But Ordinals is running into what I would say is two core problems. And I want to set this out because these are problems that need to be really identified if we want this market to succeed. The first major problem is Ordinal founders are one of the worst at pricing their assets for mint. Right now, Ordinals is way too cash extracted. It doesn't mean that you can't have paid mints. I think paid mints are still going to be viable and valuable on Ordinals. But what we're just generally seeing is very few people understand that you're not trying to price this as a perfect Dutch auction or a perfect liquidity event where the market is willing to pay the full value of the asset in the postment experience. What really great projects realize is I should actually be minting my asset at a much lower price to allow, right, a much larger market expansion to grow where real realized value and hopefully profit is captured by the holders very early, right? Because again, if you're lucky to be part of a healthy mint, what's one of the funnest things, especially if you're aligned with that project, is knowing that there's equity being built in this asset that you're holding. It is appreciating in value, right? And that's one of the most powerful, fun feelings when you find product market fit. But the biggest problem now is that with these other individuals out here in this market, what they're really consistently running into, right, is that they're overpricing. And by overpricing, they're running into, right, the standard problem of no real positive win from the community, right? But also that what they end up running into is that you're then fighting the negative emotions of falling under mint, right? And falling under mint price is one of the more devastating things for a traditional Web3 community. Again, I know it sucks that there's this emphasis on financialized value, but that is the game that we're playing, right? And if you then know that 90 or 100% of your community members are technically in the red, what you'll recognize very quickly is that, hey, that's a very easy recipe for everything to kind of just go back underwater and become negative as well. And I think this is kind of where you're starting to realize here is that this becomes one of the core traps that BTC is running into, that there hasn't really been too many narratives to allow for a project to really run and grow in a healthy way that we've seen historically, right, on ETH as well. And again, it is compounded to a very tough market. But the second problem that Ordinals is running into, and I think is very clear, is that this market doesn't have anything new as a narrative to offer, right? Almost everything you're seeing pitched again is struggling to meet the collector mindset interest at the moment right now, right? There's this overemphasis on a few of the traditional methodologies of value, like early mints, right? Like, or sorry, early inscriptions, or hey, we have, these kind of rare uncommon sats. But what we've seen as the market is directly telling us is one of those singular variables is not strong enough, right? It's not going to sustain. And we've seen this, right? Two of the projects that have inscribed on uncommon sats are both under mint in regard to Little Peepos and in regard to Seize Control. So what we're seeing is the market's struggling to understand the value of those assets. And the other problem is that the primary leaders in this market are truly struggling long term, right, in this design and in this structure to realize that in the end, almost everything in this market is feels like it's a ripoff of something else, right? And this is where you're seeing the lack of quality art coming over to ordinals, right? You're also seeing, other issues that continue to come back to this kind of core conversation where, there's a few leaders that are trying to push, certain narratives like technology first. But that's also like very unsexy of a pitch as well in this marketplace, right? And this also leads to the other problem because I think there's some amazing technology guys out there, but from a digital collector perspective, if the narrative is only around technology, it gets, too dense. It gets too uninteresting. It gets capped on the value of the technology itself in the present day. But essentially what ends up happening, right, is that narrative starts to kind of die off. And that's kind of what we're in this weird point that feels stuck for ordinals is there hasn't been a large enough narrative to pull the market forward. And again, it's an easier problem to diagnose than it is to solve, right? And finding and building a new narrative is incredibly hard, right? Finding something that actually feels fresh after dealing with Ethereum shit NFTs for the last 2-3 years is, a very difficult thing to do. But, this is something that, we're trying to be very conscious of as we design and build Ronin, right? Like Ronin is going to have, I think, a totally different counter narrative to how we think NFTs should be designed and launched. Does it mean that it's going to be the end all be all most compelling way? No, I don't think so. I think what I hope is that it brings a new conversation into the fold. That's what the ordinals market needs. That's what honestly the entire NFT market needs. It needs a new conversation. We're stuck in this problem right now, and again, this is true for ETH and this is true for ordinals, where the only conversation is floor price. The only conversation is is it above mint or below mint? How much profit, right? And how much was mint price? Those are pretty much the only conversations that are happening overall. And this is kind of why you're going to see in this market, ordinals will struggle, right? It doesn't mean that ordinals won't work, but what it is telling you is that ordinals is still susceptible to some of the same problems on ETH. And I share this as someone who's about to pitch you on being an ordinal maxi in the future, but I'm going to keep it 100% with you as we navigate into this market, right? And the truth is that ordinals is not perfect, but there are good signs, there are healthy signs, and there's something that makes it quite interesting now in this marketplace as well on where that execution needs to go. So when we're talking about the ordinals market right now, what you have to understand is the tools are generally very limited in terms of what's happening on that ecosystem. For ease of conversation and relevance, as you guys start learning about ordinals, we're going to focus on just one marketplace, and that's Magic Eden at the moment right now. This isn't us saying that Magic Eden is the best, but let's just keep it 100% here. Magic Eden does have the most volume and the most listings for most of the core collections that are relevant. There are other marketplaces, and there's going to be more marketplaces that continue to develop here. Gamma.io is another one that's quite well known. And what you're going to see is that this product and this ecosystem, it's really about trying to get the most in-depth information. And this is what we're going to do is we're going to spend a little bit of time at looking at these projects. And because we're doing this one here in Discord, I'll be able to screen share and walk you through some of the insights on some of the core projects here as well. So let me just kick off with a quick screen share here as well to kind of start. And what you're going to see really quickly is that whenever you land here on Magic Eden, it's important to understand the ecosystem that they're building. So Magic Eden, very large marketplace. They've been trying to, started on Sol, then they've come into ETH and Polygon, right? And now they're doing ordinals as well. They're trying to support all chains, right? And you can see it up here. Here's a Solana logo, here's the ETH logo, here's the Poly logo, and here's the BTC logo. So you can kind of switch through it. The other interesting thing about Magic Eden is that they're also a launch pad. So they also launch projects and they usually take a percentage of these projects as well. So here you see this canvas to code by Voca. You can go to the launch pad here and you'll see different projects that are being launched. This is an economic model and a revenue generating model for Magic Eden. Magic Eden usually charges between 4 to 10% for a launchpad project to come through of their mint, and they try to handle everything from contracts to design, etc. So it's interesting to see that, but it also creates a conflict long term for Magic Eden. But we'll get to that conversation later. Let's go back to the main page. When you get to Magic Eden, you really want to scroll down, and you want to really focus on here like these trending sections, right? And their total revenue sections here as well. And what you'll see is that you'll see kind of two core data points. You'll see the floor of each of the respective collections, and then you'll also see on the right side the total volume they've done. And this is broken down by different windows here that you could choose on the right side. So right now looking at 24 hours, you can look at 7 days, etc. here. So this is just like the place that you want to probably spend a little bit more time. Like every week you should be landing on Magic Eden ordinals like once or twice a week and just seeing what's happening, seeing which collections are getting volume. Is volume going up or down? Is there a new mint or a new launch that's relevant? It will give you a really good pulse of the market. And that's what you want, right? You want to be able to have your finger on the pulse, right, where things are going. And because of this, right, you're going to see a huge opportunity to really just be ahead of the game on what's happening here. So, what am I doing when I'm usually landing here? I'm usually looking at 24-hour volume because I'm looking at this almost every day myself. And I'm really just trying to see where are the outlier spends, outlier allocations, and movements on floors. There's really three projects I am honestly evaluating on a daily basis. One is Ordinal MaxiBiz, one is Little Peepos, one is Bitcoin Frogs, and then the last one that I think has meaningful relevance is also Seize Control. The reason I'm looking at these is pretty straightforward, but Ordinal MaxiBiz, I would argue, is probably the most relevant in terms of Ordinal meta and has probably the most upside to run. They've also been able to do this with a much larger supply, which is interesting. So you're sitting at a 2100 supply. And the other interesting thing about this as well is that this project is also really emphasizing the block 9 meta as well, as all of these assets are inscribed on block 9s, which are the first Satoshis available to inscribe from the first publicly available block in the Bitcoin side. So this one's generally pretty interesting, but there's actually another data point I'm looking in when I'm looking at OMB. I'm going one step deeper because OMB's actually blended the Genesis collection with the same core collection under one. They don't have two separate listings. So green eyes are considered this larger supply that recently launched of roughly 2000. But there's these two other colored eyes that are from the earlier collections that are called blue eyes and red eyes. So let me go to that really quickly. And I'm usually looking at what their listed floor is, right? And in this case, let me see where the first blue eye, there we go. First blue eye here is sitting at roughly 3 BTC, right, of a floor. So, usually floors would be the right place to be looking at when you're evaluating a lot of these collections, but ETH is quite different. Sorry, BTC is quite different, mainly because the volume is less and the trade activity is less. So, what do you actually really want to look at when you look at any of these collections? It's not looking at any of these floor prices. These floor prices are a little arbitrary. What you're really trying to do is you want to click on the activity tab. You want to simply understand what's selling and at what premiums are they selling to. So, one of the nice things about OMB, and when you look at this data, is that there's actually a lot of assets that are being acquired above floor, right? So even though their floor is around zero point 0.2 right now, 0.21, you could see a lot of these, this is picked up at zero point 0.4 BTC, well above floor. 0.223, 0.24 is a little bit higher than floor. 0.34 well higher, 0.28 well higher, 0.3 well higher. That's a good sign because what you're seeing is that there's individuals who are deeply selecting the identity of the assets, right? They actually want to grab an asset that they believe is aesthetically pleasing to their identity or their collector profile. That's a really good signal, right? The other signal I'm trying to understand is okay, well, blue eyes and red eyes were usually around 3 BTC or 2.5 BTC on listings. What I want to understand is what do they actually look like for sales? So I'm usually running through here and I'm trying to spot the last sale. And you can see no blue eye or red eye has sold in the last week when it comes to the open market on Magic Eden. Of course, there could be trades. So that's an asset that's not that liquid. But again, that's usually true here because there's no offers on ordinals at the moment right now. That's stuff that they're still working on and looking to deploy. But it looks like the first sale that was relevant to Red Eyes is actually 1.7 BTC. So this is probably more closer to the true floor, right? And of course, you probably want to take an average of the last three sales, is usually what I'm doing. So I'm looking at 1.7 BTC, 1.75 BTC, 1.6 BTC. So again, this still brings us back to like a 1.65 BTC overall here. That's kind of what we're looking at, the true average sales of these blue eyes or red eyes initially as well. So that's interesting and important to note because then you could actually understand how these price movements are working. So I'm curious, right? Is like when will the next sale of a blue eye or red eye be and how many are listed? So these are some of the quick data points I'm trying to understand and try to make inferences on and see how the market is evolving. And there's a lot of interesting things here. But there's also some red flags, right? And that's the other thing we always want to take a deeper understanding for. What are the red flags on any of these collections? Number one red flag. Holy shit, so many of these are listed. It is really interesting. On a 2100 supply, 449 are listed, right? That is over a 20% listing percentage, right? Which is really thick. That is a super, super high listing percentage at the moment right now. So what's crazy is that you're seeing that, and this plays a role in probably how they did allocation strategy because the way that OMB did it, they actually scale this through by giving allow list to their initial holders. I would say the holder percentage is not the right number to look at on BTC. Most holder percentages are alt wallets and fake, right? Especially in OMB. the way a lot of these worked is that when you got multiple allow lists, you're not putting them all three in the same wallet. You had to distribute them across multiple wallets as well. And that's what a lot of people don't realize, right? Is that the real number that you're trying to look at here on this design, on this structure, is that the product experience here is probably not truly 1,400 unique owners, right? And that's the other interesting thing about ordinals, is that most of these wallets don't have a lot of history. So even if you were to go call this wallet, what you'd realize is almost all of these wallets, right? A large percentage of these wallets probably have done no other transactions or very limited BTC transactions. There's probably a lot of relationships between these wallets, right, that are being funded from the same sources, right? And what you'll end up realizing is that this is probably what OMB's biggest struggle is going to be. My guess here is that on their 2000 supply, it's more around 700 to 800 unique holders. That would be my current best guess at the moment right now. That is not rooted in fact. That's just been a few signals that we've been analyzing. And it's tough because it's very, very new. And you can see that because here's the crazy thing. It's not like these are all listed at the floor. What you'll actually see, this is laddered up from point 2, and you can see it's thick at every level. We're at 0.28, 0.28, 0.29, 0.29, 0.3, 0.3, 0.32, 0.33, 0.34. Like it's literally layered up. So this is also one of the downsides of OMB is OMB will struggle to really move price value up with the way the listings and the unique holders are currently looking at in this design. And again, it just gets thick and thick all the way through where, really if you go to it, it's pretty much thick in terms of listings until, oh man, we're just at point 0.5, right? And you're just seeing it's laddered all the way through. Starts getting a little thinner around point 0.6, right? But it's still thick. It's still got a lot of listings here, a lot of 0.69 listings for the culture. But even at every point 0.1 BTC inflection, break point, there's like 10 or 20 or 30. Ooh, that's a dope looking green eyes. And that's kind of the hard part now for OMB, is that OMB is actually capped, right, a lot of their upside here as well in their design. And they've been, and that's just one of the consequences of it. But again, that's just one of the red flags. But there's tons of positivity here, right? Two of the things people don't realize is, yeah, as Bruno noted, Blue Eyes minted for 0.078 BTC just 2 months ago, right? Which is crazy on a 0.078, and assuming that they're selling at 1.7, right? That is a good 25x, right? And that's really interesting, right? And that's kind of where most people don't recognize the amount of profit that these guys have generated for holders. Even Green Eyes is massively profitable even in this bear market. What a lot of people don't realize here is that the vast majority of people on Green Eyes actually minted, about 90% of wallets minted at 0.09 BTC. So even on this floor, right? Hold on, I gotta scroll all the way back up. It's so deep. That's how crazy it is. These guys are all up 100, 120% even at this 0.20. That's really amazing, right? In a bear market, again, it's a steep min at 1.5 E, but now this is holding like a 3 ETH floor, right? How many people would love a net 1.5 E or 100% gains for that type of deep entry price point? So many, right? Because to be very honest, this is what a lot of people were hoping for Azuki Elementals, right? Azuki Elementals was supposed to be a 2E mint, and a lot of people were seeking 4E, right? And this is kind of what, Elemental, I mean, this is kind of what Green Eyes has done for the OMB community,
And that's really bullish. That's a super bullish element. On a 2000 supply, 1.5E entry still holding 3E, sometimes is around 4E, right? Depending on the market. It's really healthy. So this is what a lot of people need to understand is that there's a lot of opportunities still when it comes to everything that's happening on the ordinals front. But let's kind of continue to a few of the other projects, and there's some other elements that you should be taking a look at. The other one that's more relevant to us is that we want to understand what's happening with Little Peepos. The reason why Little Peepos is interesting for us is two reasons. One is it's pixel art, right? Which is something that Ronin is trying to do. I think the Little Peepo pixel art is fine. I don't think it's great PFP art, mainly because they did full body. But again, you could zoom in and make it work, which is interesting. But the second reason why this is valuable, it's around somewhat closer to our targeted supply, right? They're doing 420, Ronin is targeting 378. So we're trying to see where this market is. So again, Little Peepos with a very small supply is doing a ton of volume, right? Even in what, 10 or 12 days, I forget how long it's been since Peepos minted, or maybe it's only been 7 days. Time is so weird now. This is done 15 BTC. That's 450,000 or 225 ETH in volume. 225 ETH in volume in the first couple of weeks for a 400 supply project. That's really good, especially in this bear market, right? And especially when it comes to ordinals. All right, mint was 7 days ago. Thanks, Bruno, for making sure I'm keeping track of time. So I think this is still doing really well. But again, Peepo made a very, but I think Peepo made a very big mistake. They overpriced the mint, in my opinion, right? And the reason why I think they overpriced it is that they didn't really put in the work to get people to understand the value of uncommon sats or the value of what Little Peepos will be kind of moving forward. If it's just for the art, it's too pricey of an art entry point, in my opinion, right? If Little Peepos was doing this right, I mean, ideally, based off what we're seeing, this floor price now settling at, and it minted at 0.12 BTC, so it is under mint, right? What you're realizing here is that in the end, um, they probably needed to mint around 0.04, 0.05, right? Is kind of where the more interesting opportunity would have been. And the narrative would be very different. But now the narrative on Little Peepos is how far under mint will it go? Right. And it becomes this kind of doomsday scenario here in this conversation and this design of where they're going. And like I'm not the type of person who wants to say like the word cash grab for anything. I just think it's bad strategy, right? Like if we think this is a cash grab, everything's a cash grab in ETH, right? Everything's a cash grab, period. Right? This market's pretty brutal on all these fronts. But really, rather than assuming cash grab, the terminology I'd really focus on is like it's a lack of awareness of product market fit. It's a lack of awareness of like pricing strategy as well. So, in the end, right, what you see is a lot of these individuals are getting caught up, right, on what they think is fair, but that's not what the question should be. The question will be is what's the price point that will make my holders happy at mint and happy at post mint? That's the only way that you should be optimizing for this. And of course, a tertiary variable should be is can we ensure enough mint funds as well to kind of operate on the vision, right? But you don't need a lot of capital to operate art-based projects in Web3, right? So, if you could be smart on where you're going to bring in costs, it's going to be interesting. So again, on Little Peepos, what I'm trying to look at here is again just what is the number of unique holders? What is that kind of listings? And again, you're seeing this very weird thing in ordinals. Huge listing percentages. This is over 25%. It's almost 30% listing, right? Which is kind of nuts. It's like 27%, I think, if I did my weird math right in my head, 27.6%, something like that. Hold on. I want to see how close I am. 118 divided by 420. I said 27.8. It's 28.1. I was off by 0.03. It's always fun to do math in my head. So, crazy high listing percentages. And then again, you could see it's interesting. It's also pretty thick on how it's kind of layered up, right? 0.13, 0.14, 0.14, 0.16, 0.17. It's pretty much anchored up at 0.01 BTC all the way through to 0.225, still going. It looks like it's breaking around 0.25. It starts getting a little bit sparser here, but man, there's still a lot of listings. And it's very interesting. You usually don't see this type. I mean, it really breaks at 0.35. That's really where the listings kind of break. But from there to 0.35, it is very thick of listings for this small supply project. So, it does bring up some questions, right? It's just like, are these all short term, right? Flippers and collectors? Are these those who have multiple allocations here as well? Right. And that's kind of where a lot of people are going to really struggle, right? When you start looking at some of these numbers, these aren't healthy numbers, right? These aren't healthy designs. And when you're seeing a 28% listing percentage, right, you have to ask yourselves, are we actually really in it for the product experience and opportunity and narrative around crypto and Web3 and NFTs, or is this just another game to flip? And that's what a lot of this is still turning into. So, little peoples is something we want to see. I also am really interested to see, when does little peoples get defense? So OMB was getting defense around point 0.2, but it is starting to get, someone's like really undercut the floor here, right? Like, I mean, when I say undercut, he's undercut by 0.015 or 0.017 here. So, once that one's eaten up, what's been interesting is OMB's been defending at 0.2, 0.21, 0.22 really well. That's actually a really good signal. Little People's finally just went under, right? And again, someone who's a little bit undercutting here to get out sooner than later. But they've been defending this 0.1 fairly well. So again, I want to see if that defense holds and what happens to the larger market here as well. And again, Seize Control is another one that's pretty interesting. Seize Control has less supply out there. It's only around really 200-ish supply, I believe, or 220 supply here at the moment right now. So again, at a 220 supply and again, a listing percentage of 35, again, you're still seeing a 15, 16% listing percentage, pretty high. Again, this minted at 0.169, I believe. So, definitely under mint. It's been holding this 0.1 as well. That's kind of where we're seeing a lot of defense, is this 0.1 BTC and then 0.2 BTC. Those are kind of in the two areas of defense. So Little Peepos and Seize Control defending the 0.1, OMB kind of defending the 0.2 when it comes to Green Eyes as well. So, again, I'm trying to look at these. I'm trying to see which collectors are aggregating. Some of the stuff I also like doing is seeing who are whales. There's some interesting whales. Like Seize Control has a guy who's bought like 9 or 10. And I think I talked to Jameson. He's like, he doesn't even know who the person is. Right. Which is interesting, right? There's actually a lot of organic whales that are out there. So these are things I'm trying to see where they're going to defend here as well. And again, this is another uncommon sat play, right? So a little bit relevant here as they kind of do some of the more unique Satoshis to inscribe on. But the last one I'm also looking at, just always for consideration, is probably the most successful 10K supply right now on Ordinals. And that's essentially Bitcoin Frogs. This was a free mint, 10,000 supply. And again, pretty interesting numbers here. One is, you're seeing this one saying, 4,400 unique holders, so 44%. unique holder range. Again, I probably think this number is closer to 35% or so, or 30%, right? Or 3,000 to 3,500 unique owners when you're actually looking at non-alt wallets. But the good thing you are seeing is listings are lower. You're seeing a true 10% listing, right? 9.3% listing percentage. This is still would be on the higher side than I'd want to see on ETH, but this is actually one of the better ones that you've seen on BTC. So that's pretty interesting. Well, the larger supply actually has less listed. It's still thick on the listings though, right? And that's kind of the other interesting thing. I'm trying to understand, where does that look? And you could just see it's layered. You need to see massive sweeps coming in. And that's what people don't realize is there's not even a sweep feature yet, right? That's the thing people don't realize is that like BTC doesn't even have most of these features that we'd want. We don't even have offers. We don't even have like the ability to sweep, right? Realize when BTC starts offering those features, right? The ability for transaction value is only going to increase, right? Which is pretty exciting. Ooh, and Bruno just shared. Ooh, Bruno, what tool are you using for this? This is pretty cool. But Bruno is showing the distribution of the top 10 holders, and the top 10 holders own about 10% of the supply, it looks like, is what these numbers are sharing, which is pretty cool. And you're seeing some massive, massive whales. Oh my God, is that Sheetfu, man? That guy's been double dipping left and right. I love that he works for Magic Eden and is like the whole one of the larger holders on so many different ones here as well. Oh, so the top one is what? Oh, this is Matrica showing you the data. Oh, very interesting. I didn't know that Matrica kicked out data like this as well. Well, see, that's why I love talking to our diamond holders, especially those that are in it, always learning something new. So, again, you'd want to look at some of these top holder percentages and see what's happening here. The other thing about Bitcoin frogs that I was also curious on is I was looking at the activity. And what was interesting is that there are actually people buying rares here, right? And that's the other good sign about ordinals. It's not just people buying only floor. There are people who are trying to acquire rares here and there. It's definitely very less so on on a collection like Bitcoin frogs. And the reason for that is that I think that there's less value in the rarity of the design, and it's a lot harder to actually like identify and find those rare pieces here. But again, we're seeing that on OMB. We're seeing that even on little peepos. I think I saw some pretty good ones, yeah, above floor price, right? Yeah, naked one went 20% above floor price. The Matrix one went 100% above floor price. This Zeus one went 80% above floor price. And, this, I guess, Neon, what's it called? Not Neon. It's called, I guess a Neon effect is, also went up about over 100% of floor price or 70% of floor price at that time. These are really good signals to be looking at. So I hope you guys can see kind of some of the details that we're trying to spend in understanding this market. But let's talk about the larger issue that Ordinals is still facing. The larger issue Ordinals is still facing is that there's not a ton of volume and there's not a ton of collectors, right? It's still very small and it's still maturing. But if you look at it in terms of ratios and supply, for a lot of the top projects, what's been really good is that based off the ratios and the supplies and the volume that is actually happening, they're actually outperforming ETH quite a bit. And that's what a lot of people don't realize, right? They're only comparing aggregate versus aggregate. That's a really poor way to compare two chains in different values and different stages. What you want to understand is that if you look at it for individual collections, right? Like, and a good example is let's just look at OMB, right? And we look at OMB, a 2000 collection in 2 months has done 350 BTC. And 350 BTC to USD is what? I believe, right, $10 million, right? Yeah. So they've done $10 million, right? Or 350 BCC to ETH. We'll keep this going. Is 5,500 ETH in total volume OMB has done in the last 2 months on a 2,000 supply collection. Those are crazy numbers. Those are insanely crazy numbers in the middle of a bear market. You compare that to any 2000 supply based project here at the moment right now, most people don't really recognize how powerful this is. And that's what you want to be looking for is outliers. You want to be looking at different reasons on why this chain might be showing life very differently. Anyone who is comparing Ordinal's metrics to ETH metrics is dumb as fuck, right? Because if you don't understand contextual awareness between the sub assets, the sub, metrics, the supply, you're not understanding what makes, new projects survive and scale. And there's something really interesting when you start looking at this kind of opportunity and this design. And this is where, again, if we really want ordinals to survive, it's only going to be top tier stuff. What I try to tell most people is that you should ignore almost all free mints on ordinals. You should probably ignore all large supply plays on ordinals, right? It's kind of counterintuitive to what we've seen on ETH. Free mints aren't the play on ordinals. I'm not saying it can't work. It's just not the winning strategy. We see Bitcoin frogs had a little bit of leverage to it, but again, Bitcoin frogs has the leverage of claiming the first 10K to launch. It's not the first 10K to be inscribed, but it's the first one to effectively launch. So it kind of led to some interesting buying pressure there. But in the end, right, what people don't realize is free mints are not great on BTC. Anyone who's doing a free mint doesn't actually have a plan to scale that project outside of that initial mint. The other thing you want to realize as well is that it's a small supply game. This is true that we've always been telling you on ETH. It's even more so on BTC. We think that any collection that you're trying to be a part of on BTC at this point should be a sub, ideally 1000 collection to start, right? Ideally sub 500, right? Those are the real numbers that I'd be focusing on here. Because again, we're dealing with a smaller market, but we also are recognizing that most of these are really, really high value whales. That's what most people don't realize. BTC guys have been sitting on BTC forever. Again, not all BTC maxis love what is happening with ordinals. That's still another battle that needs to be won over time. But those who are BTC maxis and convinced on ordinals, which there are a ton of people like that, they are willing to spend. They are willing to accumulate, and they are trying to kind of scale in a pretty compelling way where they believe if the asymmetric upside of ordinals does realize, they will own these grails, right? And there are also other grails that are worth taking a look at. I don't really use them as data points though, but they are relevant. A good example is Ordinal Punks. Ordinal Punks is, like, by many people's standards, the punk collection on Ordinal's front. There's also Bitcoin punks, and then technically OMB is a derivative of punks. But Ordinal punks are really interesting because they are low inscription, right? So they are sub 1000 or technically sub 642. There was 100 of them. And what's interesting is that these trade at a currently 3 BTC floor. But sales are under 3. Most are selling between 2 to 2.75, 2.35. So we take the average here. I'd roughly say 2.5-ish here at the moment right now for the last 4 or 5 sales, right? Ooh, one sold really low at 1.55 BTC. But what's crazy is that they barely sell, right? Like they barely hit the market. I mean, we're talking 3 months ago on this sale, right? We actually had a weird sale in the last 24 hours. Someone sold their devil one for 2 BTC. So this is interesting to keep an eye out on. There's a few other early inscription grails. I mean, again, Little Peepos had an early one called Inscribed Pepes. That group's interesting to watch because they actually have a ton of stuff inscribed at very low inscriptions. So they're gonna like they have a bunch of stuff under 10K. So they inscribed Pepe's. This is what led to them launching Little Peepos. So inscribed Pepe's been holding a decent floor, 1.69 here at the moment right now. But again, you're seeing the last sale of an inscribed Pepe through Magic Eden at least is 26 days ago. Of course, there could be over the counter trades, and that's very true with a lot of these like smaller based communities. But again, you're seeing something where there is a lot of holding power for those who are like there early. They're willing to hold those assets significantly longer, right? And this is where you're going to see quite a few other things here as well. You're going to see, Bitcoin Shrooms has a whole collection that's probably considered the mega grail in most cases. Probably will be like 3 to 4 BTC on that front. You're also going to see, Shadow Hats is going to be coming out to the market from Forgotten Runes. I'm very keen to see what they do. They have 10 inscriptions in under 1,000, and they're going to be doing a 666 generative supply. Going to be very interesting to see where that's going to be. Shrooms is only a 200 supply. I mean, Shrooms is like will probably be auction only. I bet you Shrooms will like end up doing something crazy and like live auction on Sotheby's only, right? Or something crazy like that. And they'll all go for like three, as long as the market is healthy, like, and again, market's not healthy right now. If they come into that, like, it will probably be 3 to 5 BTC. Yeah, and Bruto's right. It's a little over 200. Yeah, the prototype shrooms as well. So, it's 221, it looks like, if we're looking at all the total numbers there. And almost all of them are sub 1,000 except two. Two are literally inscribed, I think, at like inscription 1,050 and 1,068 or something like that. So it is a true sub 1,000. Hilariously, those two not being sub 1,000 probably makes them more rare, which is kind of funny. So that's kind of the interesting thing. We kind of want to really be able to see where this goes. And exactly as Bruno notes, the prototypes are all sub 100 inscriptions. So those are still interesting projects to keep an eye out on. There's a few grails. They hold value. They don't really switch hands that often. And these are the markets and the holders that I'd be looking at that are probably true whales, right? Like my favorite is the Ordinal Punk guys. And we know a lot of the Ordinal Punk holders. A lot of them are actually diamond holders, which is really great. So what we're really interested in is like we want to build relationships with a lot of these top long-term collectors here. And because of this, they're going to have a huge opportunity to be a part of this ecosystem and also for us to learn as this market matures. So, as we kind of take a step back, what do we want to understand about the ordinal market? It's still figuring itself out. It's not perfect, right? The ordinals market still needs better tooling, right? It still needs better discoverability, right? Because that's the other thing. Do you guys realize when you go to 90% of these collections, there's no traits. You can't search. So you actually have to literally go through all of them visually yourself to go see and evaluate it. Or you have to go find someone who's created an Excel spreadsheet of all the traits and go through each one of them to see where it is. Right. And it's even crazy. OMB has no searchable traits. So there's nothing that you can do. It is literally by just the name or number or ID. That is it, or the visual screening. So what you're going to recognize here, right, is that most people don't understand in this market that it's actually incredibly inefficient in the tooling and the maturity of the marketplaces. And when those get improved, the market's going to move faster, right? Sweeps, right, is going to be really interesting, right? You're going to see offers are going to be huge, right? Right now, offers are OTC offers. Ugh, kill me now, right? OTC offers are totally, right? Not what this market wants. And yeah, they're coming up next for Magic Eden, which will be really great. And that'll be a really interesting signal to see what kind of new activity does that spur. But when you actually measure it pound for pound on some of these collections, you can make an argument that OMB is one of the best performing assets across all digital collectibles right now in 2023, right? It's probably them and Captains. That's about it, right? Or them and Meme Land. That's about it, right? They're literally pound for pound in different ways incredibly valuable. I think Meme Land actually holds the exclusive number one spot, mainly because they have such a larger supply and such a larger market cap as well. So this is kind of what you'll realize here is that there's very few other people who could rival OMB. Very few people who could rival OMB at this point. And that is a very compelling sign to start carrying then. Because again, if this digital asset, a top three, top five digital collection is now on BTC, it means that it can really scale way further. So this is kind of why I want you guys to be aware of the ordinal market as it develops, as it matures, as new features are unlocked. But I also want you to see the pros and cons, right? With the lack of wallet history, right? A lot of this stuff could be washed. A lot of these things can be alt wallets, right? And that's kind of what you want to understand is that all of this stuff is still could be shady, right? It could still very much be shady, right? So you should still be keeping one eye open. But, if you can look past that and recognize some of the true signals in this market, there's more positive out here than people recognize as well. And this is where the market is doing one massive disservice right now to each and every one of you. They're trying to call the end of ordinals way too early, right? These are way too premature. If anything, I am more scared about ETH than I am scared about ordinals right now, right? And I know this because I've been pattern matching this whole market for a long time, and I've been doing this in a professional business lens for 15 plus years. And as I continue to go through all of these steps, I quickly realize is that if I had to bet on one of these ecosystems over the next 120 days, 180 days, Ordinals is actually the better bet. I really sincerely believe that, right? And I think that ETH, it doesn't mean that ETH doesn't have viability. Don't get me wrong, ETH will still have wins. It's going to be small supply, low mint wins is really what I think is going to be the play. But I think Ordinals has a asymmetrical upside, an ability to build top five projects. And if you get one of those top five projects to sustain and endure, you could have a significant lead on the next generation and wave two for digital collectibles as well. So this is kind of why we think it's important to kind of keep getting knowledge here, keep understanding this market. So many diamonds are massively misinformed on ordinals as well. And this is kind of the biggest thing here on this kind of design is that very few people really don't recognize, right, what's going on because they haven't put in the time, right? They really haven't, right? And it's not because they don't they don't want to, it's because it's super hard to navigate and bring yourself to look at the signals of positivity when the market is decaying around us. It's tough to learn something new, right? Um, when your bags are collapsing. And this was also a major reason why I wanted to start doing these events. And we'll do these more on Twitter as well. so we could bring on more voices. And amazing, again, 384 people here concurrently just learning about this. But this is also what I want to let you know, the real alpha about our community as well, is that if we as a 400 individuals just here, or the 5,000 hyperactive people in our community as well, what you realize is that we are already going to be one of the largest ordinal communities when we bring out Ronin. We will already be one of the top three large communities on ordinals already with just our existing community. This doesn't even include the partnerships and the allocations that are coming out, right, for Ronin to allow for us to bridge to other communities as well. And this is the other reason why we could take a way bigger swing than people realize, right? Because it's not that we're just bringing dope art, right? And our art is dope. Like, pound for pound, I'm going to argue to the rest of the market, and I will fight anyone, that our pixel art collection is better than any other pixel art collection on BTC. It's original art. It will have a very diverse range. It will have unique animations, and it's going to have some really cool ways to kind of update the art over time. Not on chain, but off chain, but you could still maintain your identity. And this is kind of why, you know, if we believe that, and that's why I show you guys all the art, no one sees the art publicly yet except you guys internally. We can really bring, right, a different energy to this conversation, but we should also aim to be educated, right? We should also aim to really care about this industry more than, hey, what's the next flip we can get? Right? Because if I already wanted to flip this, you guys don't realize, like, we could have minted this shit like 30 days ago, right? And then we could have easily just pushed out some hot garbage really quickly and be like, oh, that's good enough. Let's go, right? And then we'd be in a pretty good, spot for that. But what we ended up deciding to do was we want to get this right. We want to make sure that everything that we build is native, it's high quality, it's consistent, and more importantly, it introduces a new conversation in the market. And we're trying to be very data driven about this, right? We're really trying to make sure that everything we look at, it's understanding that we know what is happening, how is the market reacting, and that what we can anticipate. If we can do that at a really healthy rate, again, I think we're just going to be in a insanely positive position long term to really come in with a new introduction on ordinals. So I want us to make sure we spend, as we build up, the Ronin strategy over the next 3 to 4 weeks. You're also going to be able to build your ordinal strategy as well. And we're working hard to get more allocation. A lot of our higher paid mints are right now just going to the diamond users. But again, we are going to find some ways to get some more accessible mints to our broader public, so you guys get more ordinals exposure over time. But in the end, we also need to curate with a very high bar. I want to be honest, there's going to be tons more cash grabs. There's going to be tons more short-term thinkers launching some garbage that doesn't even connect to the value of what ordinals is. You're going to see projects that are doing like dope art that were probably sidelined ETH projects that they're just reactivating, right, for this market here as well. And what you'll realize is that, in the end, we need to make sure that we don't get caught, right? We don't get caught thinking that, hey, these guys are doing something fresh and new. Let's go quickly fast follow it. I hope that you guys can all be consistently critical with us to then understand, right? Like, is this actually going, is this an actual real project? Is this an actual real team that is trying to build for a sustainable future? If so, we could then get to something, hopefully very powerful as well, collectively. But also we can be aware and call out the shit. And again, we've been calling out a lot of shit on BTC internally. Like we've turned down a ton of allocation, right? On a lot of projects that just felt cash extractive. So I want you guys to understand that is that even in this market and as bullish as we are about ordinals, right? I want you to all be protective and recognize that ordinals is still going to be choppy. Ordinals is going to have a lot of mines that you're going to have to navigate around. And if you could at least be aware of that and execute on that, you should be going to be in a much better position to potentially have some ordinals exposure as well. So, guys, I hope this was like a valuable initial conversation. I love being able to screen share here in Discord. We'll kind of be a little bit more data oriented when we do our next event, same time, same slot next week on Twitter. And in that event, right, we'll actually break down, we'll verbalize the metrics, we'll talk about a few of these key data points. If there's other data you want to see, let us know. You could drop that in the group chats, or sorry, the general chat or any of the rooms and tag us. We'll always keep bringing that stuff forward. Right now there's not like a singular way to measure everything, so you want to build your framework to establish value. If you could put that together, you're going to be in a really good spot, and hopefully you'll build something really powerful as well. But with that, I know you guys have all been here. I really appreciate you. Wow, amazing to see 400 concurrent people in this kind of thing is going to be pretty nuts. Really appreciate you guys all being here. Let's head to the secret chamber real quick and get you guys a dope ass relic as well. Here I could stop screen sharing so there's less stuff bothering you guys here at the moment right now. All right. This one is market, right? Yeah, ordinal market 725. Okay, we'll give you guys plenty of time. All righty then. The password is 92013. The password is 9